Thank you for joining this webinar, Network Operations and Security Operations. Can't we all just get along? My name is Liz Garcia, and I am the moderator for this event. Our industry experts, Ryan Davis, Senior Product Marketing Manager of IT Operations and Network Performance Monitoring at Extrahop, and Scott Register, VP of Product Management at Ixia, a Keysight business, will cover new insights for creating better alignment and delivering the right data to the network operations and security operations teams. Thank you for joining us, Ryan. Please say hi to our audience and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for having me on this webinar. My name is Ryan Davis. I work at Extrahop, been with the company for about 2 years, and I'm in charge of the product marketing for our performance platform, so anything to do with NPM and IT operations.
Hi. Thanks, Ryan. Hey, Scott, can I have you introduce yourself and share the agenda with our audience?
Absolutely. Yes, my name is Scott Register, and I'm VP of Product Management here at Ixia, and I'm specifically in charge of our cloud and security products for network visibility. So today we're going to obviously talk about NetOps and SecOps teams and how they work together. We're going to start off by talking about some of the big challenges that those teams are facing, challenges exacerbated by technology trends and things like that. And in fact, those challenges are getting harder, and they're getting harder at a pretty rapid clip. But there is help. There is hope, sort of, and we'll talk about the ways that those teams can work together and cooperate and improve budgeting and things like that. And we should have some time at the end for Q&A as well. And so now Ryan is going to talk to us about some of the specific challenges that these teams are facing. Ryan?
Thanks, Scott. So I'm going to walk through some of the major challenges that face SecOps and NetOps teams today, and really the challenges around kind of understanding their environment from the inside out and getting that complete insight, the real-time detection that's needed, and any kind of guided investigation for these teams to succeed. Whether NetOps or SecOps teams are investigating threats or they're ensuring delivery of critical applications or even trying to secure investment in their cloud deployments, they need to rise above the noise. And at Extrahop, we have a number of customers who leverage our solution for both security and IT operation use cases. And what these customers have in common is this notion of rising above the noise. And both SecOps and IT ops need to be enabled to rise above the noise in their network, rise above the noise in the multiple tools that are being deployed in siloed teams across an organization. And all of this is so they can protect and accelerate their business. Ultimately, both of these teams are really driving to the same goal, and that's around improving user experience, it's around driving fundamental change within their own organizations. So some questions to ask, what if NetOps and SecOps teams could answer tough questions around their entire business, from applications to infrastructure, and they could answer questions with confidence and convictions, things like what end users are being affected, what is an application's performance. Security teams might want to know what's happening in the east-west corridor, and ultimately both teams really care about is how well is the network performing. And really in this slide, we're trying to show how many layers are involved in simple requests from a user. You might have a doctor trying to access patient records, and if one of these layers is down or slow, information heading to the hospital's EMR, EHR isn't going to be transacting efficiently. the longer a doctor has to wait on the network, the less time is being spent on seeing patients and ultimately bringing in less revenue for the hospital. As well as if POS machines go down in retail locations, it clearly has an effect on the overall bottom line for that retailer. And so each of these layers in this diagram contain a potential slowdown or opportunity for a security breach, yet each of these layers is critical in the overall business objective. So let's take another look at what an organization's surface area might look like. IT and security operations teams often seem to be worlds apart, and they are at times. And in this slide, we've placed SecOps at the top, NetOps at the bottom, but these teams do share a common goal that I talked about earlier, and it's how can they be data-driven and yet still support the overall business transformation and outcomes that are associated with it. They inherently approach this goal from different angles, and both teams' efforts are largely uncoordinated, and this is a major problem that NetOps and SecOps teams face is this alignment and this uncoordination. You can see on the slide what IT ops calls the environment, SecOps calls the attack surface. While the surface area in the middle is identical, it's a very different way for both of these teams to see the world. And because these initiatives analyze the same data, this lack of alignment can lead to wasted budget, duplicated instrumentation, duplicated training and procurement efforts, and ultimately it brings an increased overhead on the network. The good news is that SecOps and IT ops perspectives gives them each a unique and valuable expertise and understanding of what's really happening in the enterprise. And in many cases, that expertise and understanding has cross-functional value. For example, things like proactive hygiene, incident response, behavioral baselines, but too often these use cases remain siloed and information is never shared across teams. And this is another major challenge facing NetOps and SecOps teams today. So I want to dive a little deeper on how SecOps and NetOps look at network traffic differently and how they see things in their own perspective. So you can see at the bottom, you have different questions that a NetOps person might be asking for the layers of silos across their network, and for users, the questions they might ask is, what is the user experience? For web, they might be looking at which servers are responding slowly. For the application layer, it's what's the app's performance, and a storage environment might be around how much capacity do we need. But on the SecOps side, they're looking at these same layers and they're asking completely different questions. On the user side, are login credentials compromised? Is that encrypted traffic malicious going across my web activity? For applications, does unusual activity indicate recon? And on the storage environment, is there unusual access to sensitive files? So really, it gets down to what is causing this and what's getting in the way. And what's getting in the way is noise. In today's enterprise, there's noise everywhere. I talked about it a little bit before. It's complex tiered applications and hybrid environments. It's tool sprawl. It's competing priorities and these siloed organizations that exist within one organization or enterprise. This noise can then lead to chaos and confusion, and it ultimately gets in the way of shared knowledge and shared responsibility across these teams. It turns security and uptime into competing priorities rather than complementary priorities, and ultimately keeps teams focused on narrow mandates instead of being focused on cross-functional outcomes. And no matter how talented a team is, they can't derive any meaningful signal from this noise without help, and that really takes reliable data. It takes rich context to allow SecOps and NetOps teams to secure their enterprise and protect any kind of critical data or systems and ultimately build that lasting trust with their users and customers. So what's holding these teams back, and how have we gotten to the place that we're at now? A lot of challenges I've mentioned in previous slides are leading to the problems organizations are facing today, the problems they're going through at this very moment. But the underlying reason we're at a crossroads with NetOps and SecOps is really the history of these two teams. The networking team has historically been focused on things like network performance and availability, while the security team has historically been focused on threats to performance by focusing on threat monitoring or malware protection or security analytics specifically. However, the lines cannot be drawn clearly in an organization anymore. Things like the explosiveness of cloud and the need to modernize IT or digitally transform business has really pushed a lot of organizations into cloud migrations or hybrid environments, which brings along with it virtualization and XaaS or everything as a service. And this is really starting to blur that once clear line between NetOps and SecOps, and really has created and demanded this need for better alignment and the sharing of data and tools. So Scott is now going to expand on why things are getting more difficult and really how these teams can move forward in today's technology environment.
Thanks, Ryan. Now, let's look at some of the technology trends that I'm sure many of you have seen that are actually compounding these problems. One place to start is a recent survey that dealt with complex networking and IT outages. And the big takeaway here is that of the 4 top categories, note that 2 of those are really security at their core. An end user just sees a slowdown in service. They don't really know why that is. If it's a server problem or a security problem, they call the operations team and report it, and then there has to be some problem determination to get to this point. And of course, many of the technology transformations that many of you are dealing with are going to impact this. Let's look at things like software-defined data centers. In kind of a traditional model, you might have autonomous, let's say, networking devices, routers and things like that with their own routing tables. Now you've got often central control for all of the networking and even compute stacks in the data center. This is great for things like automation, but it also means that if there's an outage or a compromise of that central controller, it can take the entire data center down. There once was a time when one physical server might have 3 or 4 different applications running on it, and so there were relatively few endpoints to manage. Then came server virtualization and now containerization, which means that each function, each application, or even procedure may have its own operating environment. So you've got many more individual endpoints to manage, and those endpoints may be much more diverse. Of course, with the advent of things like infrastructure as a service, where you don't even provide your own networking and cabling, you just sort of contract it out from a cloud provider, and you no longer have access to the underlying infrastructure, that means you cannot establish things like a well-defined security perimeter with a box between the internet and the organization and say, okay, everything in and out has to go through this one choke point. That's just no longer an option. And then finally, as we've deployed containerization and virtualization and things like that to enable rapid application deployment, the days where planning an app rollout might take weeks or months because you had to order servers and rack them up is way behind us. One of the benefits of a lot of these technologies is you can rapidly deploy new applications. But that means that the NetOps and SecOps teams now have far less time to respond to new initiatives. And two other things that we should talk about when we talk about sort of the challenges that are facing these teams are scale and complexity. First, networking speeds, we all know, have gone in fairly short order from 100 meg to 1 gig to 10, 25, 40, 50 gig, 100. And here at Ixia, we're already shipping our 400 gig test equipment. So be ready for that as the next wave, right? And we all know that networking speeds typically increase much faster than processing speeds. As the network becomes bigger, more diverse, you've got things like cloud deployments. There are many more spots in the network that you now have to monitor. So it's just more, it's bigger. There's more stuff that you have to look at. And odds are you aren't given sort of increased budget commensurate with the size and scale of the network. But not only is it bigger, things are getting much more complex. An example would be SSL encryption. Even as the total volume of internet traffic goes up, the amount of clear text traffic goes down. You have to have a strategy for dealing with encrypted traffic if you need it for troubleshooting and security resolution. I think Ryan mentioned earlier things like east-west visibility. Again, with server virtualization and containerization, if you want to track, whether it's performance problems or lateral movement of malware in a network, you have to have a way to see inside those virtual environments. If you're running applications in the public cloud, which are truly elastic, you may have 100 workloads in the morning, 1,000 in the afternoon, and back at 10 in the evening, then you have to have a solution that can deal with it, that can kind of scale up and down appropriately as the environment changes. And one other kind of change that has made network monitoring much more complex, there was a time when a particular Ethernet segment would really have one network on it. And now with SDN technologies, commonly you'll have multiple tunneled networks overlaid on a single physical segment. You may only want to monitor some of those, or certainly you need to be able to differentiate between those and pick out the ones that you want to see. So we've talked about some of the challenges and the technology trends that are making things a little more complex. But we should talk about the solutions as well. And obviously the topic of our webinar today is how the NetOps and SecOps teams can work together and to share tools for efficiency and budget optimization and things like that. And really, when you think about it, you can think of sort of a stack, and at the bottom of the stack, things like physical access, to the network, getting packets off the network. Those things are really easy to share. And then you can go through sort of a middle layer where you groom, filter traffic. You can perform pre-processing. You could do flow generation. Maybe you do SSL decryption, things like that. And then at the top layer, there will be some tools which both the NetOps and the SecOps teams can use, like the same individual tool. But then, of course, there will be specialized tools that specifically the security team or the networking team can use. But the key here is you want to understand and acknowledge that many of those resources can indeed be shared, and you want to do that as much as possible. So now let's look at some specific ways that we can improve that cooperation. And we'd like to make clear here that it's not just about products, it's about people and processes as well. For example, think back to that survey slide near the beginning where we showed that half of the complex IT outages were security related, but we know that most tickets come in through the NetOps team, like most trouble tickets. That means you're going to have a really well-defined handoff point between those teams so that you can take an escalation, get it to the security team for resolution. If you're going to change the network, deploy, say you deploy a new application, obviously the NetOps and the SecOps teams both need to know about that. You don't want to just surprise them and leave them unable to respond to something new. And whenever possible, when you're in the planning stages of a new network, a new application, things like that, you want to make sure that all of those stakeholders are bought in and understand what's going on to give them the time that they need to respond and to instrument the network or acquire the necessary tools. And this does need to be well documented and well defined. You don't want to sort of make it up from scratch each time. You really want to have well-documented processes that will improve over time, because every time you resolve a problem, you solve a ticket, you may learn something, and you may want to go back and update the processes and document that, again, so that you're not rediscovering the wheel each time. And also, if you have things like staff turnover, you want new people to be able to step in to that very easily. One of the things that you'll want to think about is, as we discussed, like having common tools when possible, but then each team will have some set of their own. You probably want to identify the key team members on each side so that you can more easily coordinate things like data sharing and ticket resolution. You may also want to do some cross-training so that the NetOps teams and the SecOps teams, at least the kind of key leaders, have seen the tools on the other side, so that, for instance, a security person could call a networking person and say, hey, that problem we're looking on, come look at this dashboard. I think I know what's going on. And then the networking team has some experience with that, can look at it and understand what's going on. Another big point, of course, and this is kind of a widespread idea now, whenever possible, you want to automate, especially like low-level and repetitive processes, so that you can free up your valuable IT staff to do more high-value things. And now, having talked about some of the people and process issues, let's look at some specific ways that a visibility solution can help to improve the coordination between NetOps and SecOps teams. So here's a logical view of your network with a sort of data center over to the left, cloud up at the top. The first thing you need to do, and as we said, these parts are really easy to share, you need to get the data from the network. This can be physical taps, it can be virtual taps in a virtualized or a cloud environment, or in the worst case, you can hook up to things like span ports on your switches. And then once that low-level data is extracted from the environment, you typically then want to move it through a visibility layer of things like network packet brokers. So here you can do things like pre-processing, grooming of traffic. If you want to do, maybe you need timestamping or header stripping. Maybe you need to monitor multiple segments and perform deduplication, so you're not forwarding multiple copies of the same packet. You might want to do SSL inspection and hand out clear text traffic to multiple tools. You might want to do something like NetFlow generation at this level. And then over on the right, you want to be able to selectively decide, okay, this subset of traffic needs to go to this tool managed by this team, and this other subset needs to go over here. And you can have different speeds of tools, different types of things. Some of those tools might need full packet data. Some may only need the headers. And so you process the data, kind of groom it as necessary, and then output it over to the tools shown here on the right. Now, we've mentioned SSL encryption a few times here, and I definitely want to underscore this. The bulk of traffic on your network is probably encrypted, and increasingly is encrypted with a technology called ephemeral key cryptography, which just means it's a little harder to look inside, even in a managed network. And this is something you really need to consider. If you need to see inside encrypted traffic for troubleshooting, for security purposes, you have to have an effective strategy for dealing with that. Something else that's really important to think about here is simplicity. You want something that's easy to use, that's GUI-based, that doesn't rely on long, command-line ACLs, especially since with all these different stakeholders, you may have people who only touch, let's say, the network packet broker once every few months. You want to make it really easy for them to touch something, come back, months later, maybe somebody else edits it without stepping on each other. So you want to make sure it's really easy to use so you've minimized training and, more important, retraining costs. Of course, you want something that integrates well with existing authentication and authorization schemes like your existing TACAX servers. And we talked earlier about automation, the importance of automation to save time. So whatever you have, you want to make sure that it can integrate well with things like your automation infrastructure and your SIMs for security responses. And so now, to take a deeper dive into, okay, we've gotten all this data off the network, we've pulled it off, how do we make it effective and how do we let teams use it? Let's hand over to Ryan.
Thanks, Scott. So we're going to play a little test with you guys. You've been staring at white slides this whole time, and depending on if you are a NetOps or a SecOps person, this slide will look black or white to you. Before I jump right into the Extrahop workflow, I really want to kind of touch on the how. And at Extrahop, we've created a way to analyze every digital interaction that occurs on the network, and using real-time analytics, machine learning, we've turned that data into an objective source of intelligence and investigation for both SecOps and NetOps, and we call this wire data. And this is essentially what we do is we consume a copy of unstructured network traffic provided to us from Ixia, and this network traffic covers the entire environment from core to edge to cloud, and we perform line rate decryption, decoding, full stream reassembly for every transaction in real time. And the end result is this structured wire data that can then allow us to analyze and explore and fully leverage investigation and remediation. It's this wire data that keeps our machine learning focused and reliable. Wire data also makes it possible to search and query all network transactions quickly and at scale. Everything can be searched, whether it's DNS, LDAP, database, web, storage, Mongo, ICA protocols. If it happened on the wire, you can now search it. We like to tell both NetOps and SecOps in black and white terms, if something bad happened, here's why it happened, and here's what you can do to solve it. Now, here's a visual representation of how a workflow might look. So let's say there's a threat that's detected or a performance issue comes up. The Extrahop workflow will enable both SecOps and IT ops teams to increase the timeliness of accuracy of their action, going from real-time detection to root cause in a matter of clicks. As we mentioned earlier in the webinar, one of the main challenges is NetOps and SecOps teams are using a bunch of different tools to identify a threat or performance issue, and then needing a completely different set of tools to remediate and respond, which can ultimately take them hours or days to resolve an issue. And the Ixia and Extrahop solution can accomplish all of this in one UI and in one workflow. So as we've talked about in earlier slides, this inside-out model, and Ixia and Extrahop help give you the understanding of your enterprise from the inside out. We allow users to rise above that noise we talked about earlier to protect and accelerate your business. Both SecOps and IT teams have what's listed on this slide with complete visibility, real-time detection, and guided investigation that they ultimately need to understand and secure their environment from core to edge to cloud. We can deploy in any environment, whether it's cloud, containers, virtual, or on-prem enterprise. We deploy at enormous scale, while many network and security monitoring tools cap out at 5 to 10 gigs per appliance. We can ingest line rate up to 100 gigs on a single appliance, all in real time. We've eliminated many of the tedious installation, configuration, and the constant maintenance headaches. But most importantly, we deliver accurate and timely and relevant data to make IT far easier to manage and secure. So to recap what you've heard today, I want to kind of walk through a couple of the key points throughout the webinar. And the first one is around the need for better NetOps and SecOps collaboration, and why that need is growing. And Some of the things are around the increased use of cloud, the virtualization of environments, and everything as a service is beginning to blur that line between who owns what for both the NetOps and SecOps teams. The second key point is around focused collaboration efforts on most common handoff points, and this is really around creating SLAs that ensure teams are passing along required details in the format that the deliverable must be in for processing by that other team. The third key point is around starting simple and expanding. It's really about starting small, showing success. Not everything is going to work, and there's definitely going to be situations where NetOps and SecOps need to be independent of one another. The fourth key point is around sharing data access as a common source of truth, and this really gets into the network. So the value of wire data and the ability for multiple teams to share a common tool that will provide visibility into everything that is happening on the network. Leverage that single objective source of truth in wire data. And the last key point and takeaway is around coordinating on tool requirements and usage. And this one's simple. Don't spend double or triple the amount of money where you don't have to. Procurement and finance teams will appreciate the consolidated effort to not waste money. So thank you for your time. With that, we're going to move into Q&A, and please submit any questions you have in the chat box, and Scott and I will be happy to start answering some questions.
Thank you so much, Scott and Ryan, for walking us through your insights. We are unfortunately up on time, but we will stay after for Q&A, as I did see some questions come through during the presentation. A reminder to the audience that you could still submit questions using that Q&A button. If we don't get to them, which we might not because we are up on time, we will answer those via email after the event. So if you have questions, please still submit them. I also want to remind you that we will send you the PowerPoint slides, event recording later this week. And I think now we're ready to jump into Q&A. Scott, this first one is for you. If the security operations teams want a specific flow, how do they typically request it?
So it's a good question. Actually, if you're using Ixia gear, they typically don't, quote, request it. We make the UI really easy to use, and our role-based access controls are very tight. So literally, if a security or other team wants something, they come to the UI, they click on the source, click on where they want it to go, maybe apply a filter, and they're good. So that's how they get the data that they need.
Thank you. Next question is for you, Ryan. Are different teams like to see alerts and data in different ways? Is that possible?
Yes. So we have three major product platforms. One's around security, one's around the performance line, and then the other one is around cloud. And all three of our product lines are purpose-built for each group of users. So the security group is going to see dashboards and alerts that are relevant to the attack chain in a security workflow. The performance platform is really geared towards the NetOps and IT ops of the world, and our cloud solutions will help customers who are looking for cloud security, cloud migrations, any kind of hybrid or multi-cloud environments, and gaining visibility within those deployments.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Scott, I believe this next one is for you. After traffic is decrypted, can it still be filtered and groomed by each team's tool needs?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I guess a common example of that is if you have compliance concerns, let's say you have multiple data streams, one of those data streams that's being decrypted maybe has credit card transactions. So one of the things we can do is apply data masking, which means overwriting all but the last, let's say, 5 digits of a credit card number before sending that data to a recording device or external tool. So yeah, absolutely, you can do all the sort of normal, high value things that we do on those data streams after they're decrypted.
Thanks, Scott. And I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. I see a number of questions still coming in, so thank you, audience, for your participation. Continue to submit your questions. Unfortunately, we can't answer them right now due to time, but we will answer those after the event. Thank you, Ryan and Scott, for answering those questions. And a big thank you to our audience for your interest and participation. A reminder that if we didn't get to your question, we will answer it by email. If you want more information about Ixia or Extrahop solutions, please download the documents shared in this console or links to contact us. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.